hell yeah, I'm going out there and stirring the pot. I'm not going to go out there and let my guys get slandered, get talked down to, and get disrespected in this poll. Because yesterday, we had ourselves the Hockey News, who tweeted out a very simple poll. It was between two choices, and at the time of recording this audio, it's July 11th at night. It is going to be uploaded about 12 hours from now, so this 8,394 votes tally might be a little bit outdated, but at the time of recording this audio, you have yourselves a pretty dead even split of results, 51.5% to 48.5%. The poll is simple. Who would you rather have on your top line? The first answer, the one that's in the lead, the Tkachuk brothers. Second answer, right underneath that, the Sedin twins. The Hockey News is going out there and asking whether or not the Tkachuks or the Sedins are more valuable for your top line. And based off of the results, based off of the replies, I feel like it is my duty to go out there and talk about this on the channel, because this is right up my alley. This is the type of hypothetical conversation that doesn't really mean anything that I love to talk about the most. Let's break down Brady, Matthew, Henrik, and Daniil, and ask the question, who would be a better pairing for your top line? Now, the Hockey News, they went out and they replied tongue-in-cheekly, how are the Sedins losing the poll when the Swedish Twins commercial exists? And of course, if you were around the NHL's fandom back when this was made, you'll remember that the Swedish Twins dancing in the hotel room was a really funny joke at the time. But aside from that, there are a bunch of replies that I really don't think just get what the Sedins game is like. And I'm spoiler alert, Canucks fan right here. I'm going to say I'd rather have Henrik and Daniil in my first line than Matthew and Brady. But when it comes to the talent profiles of each of these guys, it's very intriguing to see where the differences and the similarities lie. One of the things that we had seen pop up in the replies of this tweet quite frequently was, okay, I'd rather have Brady and Matthew because their peaks are better than each of the Sedins' peaks. And if you go strictly off of point production, you might find yourselves an argument that supports it. Matthew Tkachuk had 109 points in a career year. That bests Daniil Sedin's 104-point career year, and it's a few behind Henrik Sedin, who had 112 points in his career high. And the points argument is one that is brought up quite a lot in the replies to this tweet by the Hockey News. Folks saying, yeah, well, Matthew Tkachuk is in that point production territory, plus he's more physical, plus he fights, plus he hits. He does a lot more than the Sedin twins did, and Brady is following in a similar mold, therefore I would rather have the Tkachuks. And man, does that argument really take out a lot of the context of what the Sedins were able to do. When Henrik and Daniil were scoring their 100-plus point years, which both won them Art Ross trophies, by the way, they were playing in an era where the game was a lot less speedy, where it was a lot less, let's just say, fast-paced, and a lot more rough and tough than it is now. I'm not going to go out there and say that the 2010s were the roughest and toughest era that hockey has ever seen, but it was certainly a lot more physical than it is nowadays. Just watching all the hits and watching the physicality, the fights, the hip checks, you don't ever see a hip check nowadays. You'd see hip checks every other night in the 2010s when you were watching hockey in that era. And this isn't even like, oh, I'm trying to talk to y'all about how old I am and how experienced of a hockey fan I am. I'm 23 years old. But tell you what, watch a hockey game that took place in 2010. Watch Canada versus USA, Olympic gold medals, 2010 Olympics. Watch Vancouver, Boston, 2011 finals, games 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. Watch the Chicago series against Vancouver. Watch Chicago, Boston, 2013. Watch any of these games and tell me that those games have the same amount of physical intensity as hockey games do nowadays. In the Stanley Cup Playoffs in 2023, we didn't even have a fight after the second round. Vegas, Dallas, and Florida, Carolina went their entire series without a single fight. The game is just different nowadays. And plus, you have the added benefit that when the Sedins were putting up 100-plus points, There was nobody else doing that. Like, when Henrik Sedin won his Art Ross trophy with 112 points back in 2009, 2010, you had Backstrom, Ovi, and Crosby, each getting 100 points as well. When Daniel Sedin got 104 points the very next year, how many other players in the NHL had 100 points? 0. When Matthew Tkachuk posted up 100 points this year and last year, how many other guys were at 100? Matthew was 8th overall in points last year, with his 104 points behind Stamkos, Matthews, Kaprizov, Draisaitl, Huberdeau, Gaudreau, and McDavid. This year, Matthew Tkachuk was one of 11 players to get 100 points, and he was tied for 6th overall in the league. This era of scoring is just different. The Sedins were putting up the same amount of numbers, roughly, in a version of the NHL that was more physical, had more fights, and was a lot more difficult to score in, just in general. The Sedins had a magnitude of offensive caliber talent that has not been attained by Matthew nor Brady Tkachuk. Brady is in a position where he's a lot more physical, I'd say, than Matthew. If I had to, I kind of don't want to do this, but if I had to pick one to win in a physical altercation on the ice, I'd pick Brady. He's a little bit bigger. I'd say he packs a little bit more in his punches, and he's not afraid to be a little bit more reckless when he takes down guys with his body checks. But aside from that, even though the point production is elite out of both of these players, I think if you're using the points themselves as a metric to say you'd rather have the Tkachuks because they offer elements to the game that the Sedins don't, I think you're really undervaluing just the offensive dominance and the potency that Henrik and Daniil combine together to create. Sedinary magic is never going to be replicated by anybody else in the NHL, whether or not they're brothers or twin brothers or whatever. The Sedins had this strange telepathic connection to always find each other, with a pass back door from the corner, a pass around the net when nobody's looking, a reverse pass when you're faking going around the net. These two were just magnificent with their telepathy, their positional awareness on the ice, and as a result, in an NHL that was a lot more physical and I'd say a lot more dangerous 10 years ago or so, the Sedins were able to have their way with the rest of the league for a good portion of that time. The way the Hockey News phrases it, of course, you could say, oh, well, the Sedins are really old now, so I'd rather have the Tkachuks, but assume prime. Assume Tkachuks in their prime, Sedins in their prime. Maybe that's unfair because we have not seen the Tkachuks in their prime yet. We haven't seen Brady in his prime. He's maxed out at 80-something points in a year. Matthew Tkachuk, you could debate he's already in his prime. But just when it comes to player, Henrik and Daniil each have hardware. Matthew Tkachuk, unfortunately, does not have the same hardware to carry forward that same sort of reputation. And furthermore, when it comes to just the practicality of having these types of guys on your team, part of me thinks that it's a little bit redundant to have two power forward, physically active guys on the same line. If you separated it, Brady on one line, Matthew on the other, that would make a lot more sense to me. But the way the question is phrased, who would you rather have on your top line, Brady and Matthew or Henrik and Daniil? I think just from a practicality point of view, I'd rather have Henrik and Daniil because they could feed off of each other to get points, score a lot of goals. Brady and Matthew might inadvertently end up stepping on each other's toes and getting way too many unnecessary penalties, whether that be minor or major penalties, because these guys are both going to be fighting. They're both going to be getting involved physically, maybe getting a dirty hit in there once in a while. So to anybody who's actually saying, oh yeah, I fully believe it's Brady and Matthew because look at the points, look at this, look at that, look at the impact that Tkachuk made in the playoffs. I think firstly you're disregarding what it was the Sedins had to deal with when they were in their primes. You're disregarding just how good the Sedins were, and I feel like there's a little bit of recency bias there. And sure, if you think that I'm being biased, I am. Canucks fan here, baby. I'm going to go out there and say what I think, even though what I think may not be true to what it is that you believe if you're not a Canucks fan. So that's kind of why the comment section is there. I hope y'all let me know in the comments all your opinions about whether or not you'd rather have the Sedins or the Tkachuks on your top line. Assume it's going to be for a season. Assume they're both in their primes, or both pairings of both players are in their primes. So Brady, Matthew, Henrik, and Daniil, who would you rather have on your top line? Let me know in the comments what you think is more valuable, the points or the physicality. Do you think that the extenuating circumstances of the league change what it is that you conclude in this argument? Because for me, it definitely does. I feel like if prime Henrik and prime Daniil were in today's NHL, they'd get a lot more points than just 104 and 112. But that's just me. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.